You are watching the single most consequential geopolitical chess match of the 21st century play out in real time. Donald Trump's high-stakes summit in Beijing was absolutely epic. The first sitting American president to visit China in nearly a decade. And what he just extracted from Xi Jinping and the Great Hall of the People is nothing short of absolutely jaw-dropping. Stick to the very end of this video because I'm going to show you the shocking deal Trump just secured with President Xi. We're going to see how China just flipped on Iran and changed the Strait of Hormuz forever. And we're going to see exactly how Trump just changed the global order in a way no president ever has. This is 4D chess in its most spectacular form, and you're about to get a front row seat. You're not going to want to miss this. Greetings, everyone. It is Live Stream Friday. I am your host, Dr. Steve, your Patriot Professor, celebrating yet another glorious day in the Trumpian golden age that you made possible back in November 2024. So if you want a front row seat on how you continue to change the nation and the world in ways you never even imagined, you know what to do. Make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. I love Live Stream Fridays. They're so cool. As always, we got a jam-packed show for you today. Our super chats are up, so please feel free to send in your comments, your questions. It will be my honor, my privilege to read and answer them during our live stream. Also, before we dive in here, what have I told you? There's actually a little-known arbitrage play hiding inside a $30 billion market. That's right. You heard it. Billion with a B. And regular people with zero background in finance or tech are quietly generating, $5,000, $10,000, even $20,000 a month from that, using nothing but a laptop. I know that sounds almost too good to be true, but here's what's actually going on. There's a significant and very real pricing gap in the used book market. The same book can be worth dramatically different amounts depending on where it's listed, on what website. And the people who've learned how to spot and exploit that price gap are building serious, sustainable income. And what makes this unlike anything else I've come across, you actually never handle a single physical book. No inventory piling up in your garage, no trips to the post office, no physical logistics whatsoever. The whole thing runs from your browser. You identify the opportunity, you make a few clicks, and the fulfillment side is handled entirely by someone else. And I want to be clear, this is not a side hustle that just pads your grocery budget. Gang, this is a real business model where people are running full-time right now, many of them having walked away from jobs they frankly couldn't stand. So that's why I'm personally hosting a free training where I'm going to walk you through exactly how this system works, start to finish. No filler, no theory, just the actual mechanics of how to find the opportunities and what to do with them. I've gone deep on this, and I'm genuinely excited to show you what I found. So click on that link below or type bkprofit.com/Turley in your browser. You can scan the QR code on your screen to reserve your free spot right now. You do not want to miss this one. It's awesome. I love it. It's a combination of the two things that I love, books and making money, right? So it's wonderful. All right, let's dive right in here. So this week was without question the most consequential presidential visit to the Middle Kingdom, as it's called, in the modern era. This wasn't just any state visit. It was the first one in nearly 10 years by a U.S. president, for sure. But this was a state visit that came after months of Trump squeezing China from every direction simultaneously. We've been talking a lot about this for weeks now. Trump has applied trade pressure, tariff pressure, a rare earth standoff, the Iran pressure campaign, the Strait of Hormuz crisis from which China gets 40 to 50% of its oil, the Strait of Malacca deal that just gave U.S. forces full access to that choke point, that crucial narrow waterway in Southeast Asia through which 80% of China's imports travel. And bottom line, China was hurting. Xi Jinping needed this meeting far more than Donald Trump did. Trump came into this meeting with more leverage than any American president in modern political history. And that, gang, that's, as they say, that's the entire ball game right there. This summit was decided before it even began. That's what the legacy media will never tell you, because they're too busy projecting their incessant TDS to their dwindling audience. Trump walked into this summit literally holding all the cards. China's entire business model, think about it. We were actually talking about this last night at an affair I was at. China's entire business model has been built on two planks: cheap oil and cheap exports. Cheap oil and cheap exports. That's it. You could do a lot with just like a couple of things. Google has amassed trillions of dollars on a business model built on two planks: aggregate and advertise. Aggregate through giving all this free stuff and assemble billions and billions of people into your network, and then advertise to them. And they've made trillions of dollars. China has made trillions through cheap oil and cheap exports. Without cheap oil, bought on the black market at a massive discount, and without cheap goods that ships out to 80% of countries across the globe, China's business model collapses. Think about what Trump has done in these last several months. He's cut them off. Well, actually, starting in January, he cut them off from the cheap oil by cutting them off from Venezuela. And then he cut them off from the cheap oil from cutting them off from Iran. He's actually holding, as we speak, 40 to 50% of China's oil imports hostage by shutting down the Strait of Hormuz. And at the same time, Trump has hit China with the highest tariff rate of any major trading partner, peaking at 145%. So, which causes their goods, the price of their goods, to rise. So Trump has basically eviscerated the very heart of China's global business model. And so that's what made this summit so fundamentally different from every other presidential summit. When Obama went to Beijing, he was hat in hand. It was embarrassing. When Biden met Xi in San Francisco, it was essentially a damage control summit. But when Donald Trump stepped off Air Force One in Beijing this week, he wasn't alone. He brought the entire economic Avengers team with him, right? We're talking Elon Musk of Tesla and SpaceX. We're talking Tim Cook of Apple, Jensen Huang of NVIDIA. That was huge. Larry Fink of BlackRock, Kelly Ortberg of Boeing, Goldman Sachs, Visa, Meta, Qualcomm. The list goes on and on. Gang, Trump didn't show up with a briefcase. He showed up literally with the Fortune 500. I mean, can you imagine sitting in Xi Jinping's chair, watching that delegation walk off the tarmac? You know, you expected one cowboy who's basically decimated your entire business model, and instead he gets off the plane with the entire cavalry. And here's the message that cavalry sent in unmistakable diplomatic terms: America is open for business, but we're doing business on America's terms in a way we don't get ripped off anymore. But it gets better, because look at the pre-summit positioning here. This is where the 4D chess really begins to come into focus. According to Politico, China did not officially even confirm Trump's visit until just a couple of days before he landed. That's unprecedented. All right. China, in diplomatic ease, China would have confirmed to their nation that there was going to be a major summit months ago. What that means is that China was still haggling over what was even going to be discussed right up to the final hour. The Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent actually held an emergency meeting with Chinese officials in South Korea literally just hours before the summit, reportedly still negotiating the terms on the ground. The translation of that is rather simple. Xi Jinping was desperate. He needed this meeting badly enough to keep negotiating into the final hour, which means Trump showed up calm, cool, smiling, holding all the cards, while Beijing was frantically looking for its poker chips under the table. That, my friends, is what 4D chess looks like. Not weakness, not flattery, leverage, pure leverage. So with this 4D chess motif as our model here, what I want to do in our live stream today is I want to show you Trump's 4 major moves that he made here, what I'm calling the 4 fronts at the summit, so that you have a full understanding of exactly the 4D checkmate involved in all of this. So there's 4 fronts involved here. Let's go through them one by one. The first front is what we might call the front of flattery. That's right, the front of, this is the art of the deal after all, right? The front of flattery. And what a lot of people simply don't understand is the importance of the strategic use of flattery in high-stakes negotiations. For example, strategic flattery explains exactly why President Xi said this.
完全可以并行不悖，相互成就，造福世界。
This is a historic visit. This year marks the start of China's 15th five-year plan for economic and social development. The over 1.4 billion people of China, drawing on the rich heritage of our over 5,000-year civilization, are advancing Chinese modernization on all fronts through high-quality development. This year is also the 250th anniversary of American independence. The over 300 million American people are reinvigorating the spirit of patriotism, innovation, and enterprise, and ushering in a new journey for the development of the United States. The people of China and the United States are both great peoples. Achieving the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation and making America great again can go hand in hand. We can help each other succeed and advance the well-being of the whole world.
So Xi's gone MAGA. Xi's gone MAGA. Make America great. Xi framed the summit as making both China and America great again. He overtly and publicly endorsed the Trump project of making America great again, and in so doing, he believes Trump is helping to make the world great again. Xi is flattering Trump because Trump has so much leverage over him, and leverage involves having what others want. But, and this is absolutely key, it also works the other way around from a different dynamic. And that's a very, very important observation, because a lot is being made right now of Trump's comments to Xi when he said this at the negotiating table.
President Xi, I want to thank you very much. First of all, that was an honor like few have ever seen before. And I think I was particularly impressed by those children. They were happy. They were beautiful. The military is obvious. It couldn't be better, but those children were amazing, and they represent so much. And I know they represent so much to you. You and I have known each other now for a long time. In fact, the longest relationship of our two countries that any president and president has had. And that's, to me, an honor. We've had a fantastic relationship. We've gotten along. When there were difficulties, we worked it out. I would call you, and you would call me. And whenever we had a problem, people don't know, whenever we had a problem, we worked that out very quickly. We're going to have a fantastic future together. Such respect for China, the job you've done. You're a great leader. I say it to everybody. You're a great leader. Sometimes people don't like me saying it, but I say it anyway because it's true. I only say the truth. And I just want to say, on behalf of all of the great delegation that we have the greatest businessmen, the biggest, and I guess the best in the world. We have amazing people, and they're all with me. Every single one of them, we asked the top 30 in the world, every single one of them said yes. And I didn't want the second or the third in the company. I wanted only the top. And they're here today to pay respects to you and to China. And they look forward to trade and doing business, and it's going to be totally reciprocal on our behalf.
Now, the borderline illiterates in the legacy media want you to think that that's an example of American decline, that was a U.S. president literally groveling at the feet of Beijing. I kid you not. The legacy media is pushing, I mean, look at this headline. The legacy media is pushing literal Chinese propaganda, because that's what Xi Jinping said over a decade ago, that China was ascending and the U.S. was declining, and the world order would inevitably reflect that. And so the legacy media is deliberately pushing Chinese propaganda, just as they've been pushing Iranian propaganda, in claiming, in this case, that Trump was bowing to Beijing there. What that pathetic excuse for analysis misses, you know what? It's not even political illiteracy. The legacy media knows what's really going on here. They just decided to lie to you, or I should say, to their dwindling audience. The legacy media knows what Trump is doing there. Instead, though, they're lying. And their audience loves to be lied to, right? This is a post-truth era, and they are deliberately lying so as to try to infect more people with their ridiculous TDS. What every great behavioral psychologist knows, what every student of Machiavelli, what every reader of The Art of the Deal already knows, flattery in the right hands, in its right use, is not weakness. It is, in fact, the opposite. It is the most powerful negotiating weapon ever invented. Now, if you don't know, in Chinese political culture, there is a concept known as maiyinzhe, which literally means face, as in saving face. It's the actual social currency that determines how much power a leader has inside an authoritarian hierarchy. So in a system where there are no elections, there's no ballot box, there's no democratic legitimacy, a leader's prestige is his power. Or you could think of it the other way around. A leader's power is his prestige. And when you take face away from an authoritarian leader publicly, meaning when you take their dignity, their prestige, the perception of their integrity and their respect away from them, you don't just embarrass them, you actually destabilize the regime. You destabilize his entire ability to govern. Precisely because face is the social currency by which he governs. This is why authoritarian leaders who lose face in a negotiation, what will they always do? Always, without exception. They will have no choice but to dig in, to retaliate, to refuse to concede on anything visible. They're not negotiating anymore. They're fighting for survival. And Trump, who's been studying how to deal with people for decades, who grew up reading Dale Carnegie, who wrote The Art of the Deal, Trump has a deep understanding of this. When Trump calls Xi a great leader inside the great hole of the people on Chinese state TV in front of Xi's own party officials, he knows what he's doing. He's not being sycophantic. He's certainly not groveling, for heaven's sakes. He's handing Xi a domestic political asset worth more than almost anything Trump could have offered financially. He was giving Xi the ability to walk out of that meeting having saved face in front of his own party. He can look at them and say, the most powerful man in the world just flew across the Pacific Ocean to call me publicly a great leader and a peer. That is the currency authoritarian systems run on. And Trump gave it to him for the price of one sentence, and then he proceeded to extract absolutely breathtaking concessions in return. And this isn't the first time we've seen that. We have the same playbook over and over again. Trump wrote Kim Jong-un beautiful letters. He called him smart. He walked across the DMZ. He actually asked him permission if he could come in. It would be my honor if I could step over this line and step into your beautiful country. And he did this while keeping every sanction in place. He wasn't groveling to Kim Jong-un. And he's done the same with Putin in press conferences while the United States was crushing Russian oil revenue and selling weapons to Ukraine. The optics look like surrender only to the willfully ignorant, to the politically illiterate, or the lying legacy media when all is said and done. The substance is the exact opposite. It's the means by which Trump gets literally everything he wants. And so then that leads us to the second chess move, to the second front of the summit. Front two is the Iran masterstroke. China just defected on Tehran and has changed the Strait of Hormuz forever. So what happened with China and Iran at the Beijing summit may be the single most consequential development in the ongoing Iran war. And I want to make sure you understand the full magnitude of what just took place here, because the numbers really are staggering. So here's the baseline, okay? China used to import, China imports 11 million barrels of crude oil per day. So that's a record high, okay? Of those, nearly 2 million came from Iran. And again, this is per day. And they were often disguised through ship-to-ship transfers off Malaysia and Indonesia to dodge U.S. sanctions. These are these phantom shipping and so forth. So bottom line, they were getting 1 out of every 7 barrels from Iran, delivered at a deep discount because Iran has nowhere else to send it. China's been the Iranian regime's single greatest economic lifeline. 90% of every barrel of oil Iran exports goes to China. The entire hard currency revenue stream that keeps the IRGC funded, that keeps the missiles flying, it all runs through Chinese refineries. But this week changed all of that. Check this out.
Out of their oil, 40% of their oil from that location. So what has happened, and one thing I think that we're going to make a deal on, they've agreed they want to buy oil from the United States. They're going to go to Texas. We're going to start sending Chinese ships to Texas and to Louisiana and to Alaska. And I think that was another thing that was agreed to. That's a big thing.
What about liquefied natural gas?
It's not that much longer.
Gas too?
Yeah, everything. Energy.
Energy.
That's the one thing. They really need energy. That's the one thing. They have an insatiable appetite for energy, and we have unlimited energy. You know, we've now under me, but we now produce more than, if you combine Saudi Arabia and before the war, if you took Saudi Arabia, Russia, put them together, we're doing twice as much oil and gas as they are. Think of that. It's amazing.
Venezuela is one. We're two.
Called drill, baby, drill, right?
It's amazing. So there you have it. I mean, that's huge. That alone, that China wants to reduce its dependence on the Strait of Hormuz, changes the geopolitical chessboard in literally permanent ways. That phrase is doing enormous diplomatic work, because reducing dependence on the Strait of Hormuz is the polite diplomatic way of saying we want to reduce dependence on Iran. And then Trump went on to say on Fox News that Xi Jinping would like to see a deal with Iran. that Xi literally said, if I could be of any help at all, I would like to be of help, which again is diplomatic speak for yo Iran, yo regime. It's time to go full Venezuela. It's time to take whatever carrots Trump is offering you and make the deal and move on. Go retire on some island in Indonesia or something like that. I mean, the very nation that spent decades financing and propping up the Iranian regime just offered to basically pressure it to fold, to concede to all of Trump's demands. And the proof? Who is China now buying crude oil from? To the tune of 600,000 barrels per day, worth close to $10 billion per month. Beijing is simultaneously paying Washington for more oil while publicly stating opposition to Iran's attempt to militarize and toll the Strait of Hormuz. That's not neutrality anymore. That's a slow motion defection. China is quietly exiting stage left on the Iranian relationship, and now they have no one. And this is exactly what Trump's three-front pressure campaign was designed to produce. So first, you squeeze Iran militarily and economically with the blockade. So you're draining the IRGC of $500 million per day. Word on the street, by the way, is IRGC isn't getting paid anymore, which means the regime, again, is going to collapse because the regime is based on patronage. The regime buys loyalty. And the moment the money dries up, so does the loyalty. Second, you weaken China's backup options by getting rid of Venezuela. They're no longer on the table for China. And then third, you give China an off-ramp in the form of American oil. Forget going to Venezuela, come to Texas. So you get American oil, get American soybeans, get American Boeing jets. And China, staring at a slowing economy, a property crisis, youth unemployment, they take the off-ramp. Why wouldn't they? Iran just lost its financier. They just lost its biggest customer and its most important diplomatic backer in the same summit. That is 4D chess at the highest level. So front one is the strategic art of flattery. Front two is getting China to defect on Iran, which is absolutely huge. But then front three is what I'm calling the jackpot, the economic avalanche. Trump came away with a massive economic haul from this summit, and the numbers really are absolutely breathtaking. We're talking 200 Boeing 737 MAX jets. Okay, China, again, you have to put this in perspective. China has not placed a major Boeing order in years. They've been routing their business straight to Airbus in Europe. 200 planes coming back to Boeing means American manufacturing jobs, American supply chains, and a direct hit to European aerospace. It signals to the entire global market that the U.S.-China trade lane is back open for the big-ticket American goods that move the trade deficit. We're also talking 25 million metric tons of U.S. soybeans per year for the next 3 years. So that's American farmers in Iowa and Illinois and Nebraska. The people were getting crushed by the trade war. Now they're getting their largest customer back. And we already talked about the 600,000 barrels of American crude oil per day that's already happening now. It's already being sold via West Texas oil. At current prices, again, that's close to $10 billion per month flowing from China into American energy producers. You've got the extension of the rare earth minerals agreement. So China suspending its export controls on rare earths like gallium and germanium and antimony and graphite for the benefit of U.S. end users. So this was the economic weapon Beijing was hoping on. They were counting on to strangle American chip manufacturing, American battery production, American solar panels, American defense systems, right? We need rare earth minerals to create all of these things. And Trump has Beijing with its hand off that weapon for another year minimum. And that's largely because of the chip deal. Again, it's just amazing how he uses the leverage here. China, for all of their minerals monopoly, they are still radically dependent on American chip and silicon manufacturing via NVIDIA. And this is, it's subtle, but it's absolutely masterful. Trump approved the sale of NVIDIA's H200 chip to about 10 major Chinese tech companies. Prior to that, NVIDIA was banned from trading with China. They still were able to get some of those chips in, but nevertheless, they were banned. That ban's been lifted. Now, once again, the borderline illiterate headlines made this sound like a concession. But let me tell you what was not approved. And again, this is so fascinating. What was not approved was the NVIDIA, what's known as their Blackwell line. So this is the B100, the B200, the B300, the chips that train America's frontier AI models. The chips the major American labs are stockpiling right now. Those have stayed banned. Trump gave Xi yesterday's flagship chip. China gets the previous generation. NVIDIA gets billions of restored China revenue, and American AI labs keep their structural lead on the frontier. And then now, when Trump and Xi sit down in their next meeting in September, when Xi comes to the United States, when he's at the White House, the Blackwell ban now itself becomes new leverage. Something Xi badly wants, something Trump can hold over the table for the next round. This is not giving away the crown jewel. That is giving away last year's model while keeping the crown jewel locked in the vault for round two. It's called the art of the deal. And then that finally brings us to the fourth front in this 4D chess. And it's this front that many believe to be the most consequential of them all. But first, gang, if you aren't just joining us, our super chats are up, so feel free to send in your comments and your questions. I'll be happy to answer them. It'd be my honor to answer them on this live stream here. Also, you know, when the left talks about affordability, they never seem to mention how costly, excessive Biden-era regulations have been to American families. So, for example, under Biden, between 400 and 800 new rules I can't even swallow that, right? Were forced on hardworking Americans each year. All these excessive rules and laws placed a heavy $1.8 trillion burden on the back of hardworking Americans. Now, thankfully, Trump is changing all that. Last year, his administration cut more than 600 rules and regulation, and the result was hundreds of billions of dollars in net savings, about $600 per American, and he's not done. Next month, the SEC is officially axing something called the Pattern Day Trader Rule. It's a relic of the establishment era that's long served as a barrier to entry for building wealth in the stock market. Now, this rule forced people to keep $25,000 in their account if they wanted to day trade. But by removing this arbitrary threshold, the Trump administration is effectively democratizing the stock market, allowing everyday Americans to manage their own capital without being sidelined by wealthy elites. So, if you've ever wanted to build wealth using the stock market, now's the time to get started, which is why I'm so excited that Mark Wilburn of Neos Capital will be hosting a free 6-day online training called the Zero to Trading Bootcamp. It starts May 18th. It goes all the way to the 23rd. Mark is a good friend of this channel, and he's been trading for nearly 20 years. His stock picks and trainings have helped our listeners not only beat the market, but in some cases even 2x or 3x their market returns. Now, the last time Mark hosted one of these events, we had so much positive feedback from our listeners that we asked if he would do another. People like Randy, who said, quote, "The Zero to Trading Bootcamp is an amazing program. Your financial life can be forever changed." That's one of us, gang. So if you're wondering what you should do to position yourself to prosper in these turbulent times, then click the link below right now or go to freeturleyticket.com to reserve your spot. It's online and everything. It's wonderful. You can enjoy it from the comfort of your own couch. Actually, tickets are normally $97 for Mark's trainings, but Mark's agreed to open up registration for free for all of our listeners because he wants to support patriots like you. Go to freeturleyticket.com right now to reserve your spot. It begins May 18th. You're going to absolutely love it. All right. So this brings us finally to front four. And that's the body language throughout this summit. Now, these are the details that tell the full story of who was actually in control of this meeting. First, the reception itself. Vice President Han Jun was waiting at the airport to greet Trump, a higher-ranking official than even during Trump's last 2017 visit. Hundreds of young people in uniforms waving ribbons and shouting welcome slogans. Large crowds gathering outside the Four Seasons Hotel where Trump was staying. Chinese social media absolutely lighting up with enthusiasm for Trump's arrival, something that's not happened for any foreign dignitary this year. Despite years of anti-American propaganda from the CCP, Donald Trump still generates a level of curiosity and enthusiasm and excitement inside China that the CCP simply cannot manufacture or replicate. And Chinese observers, insiders who know how to decode CCP symbolism, notice something extraordinary. The children at the welcoming ceremony, they weren't wearing red scarves. Now, gang, the red scarf is the signature symbol of the what's called the Young Pioneers, one of the CCP's most important youth indoctrination organizations, representing communist ideology and the communist cause. Beijing deliberately soft-pedaled its most visible communist symbolism for Donald Trump and his delegation. That's not a small thing. That's Beijing quietly signaling we need this man's goodwill more than we need ideological posturing. And then there was Xi himself. Chinese observers noted that compared to previous summits, Xi appeared noticeably more restrained and less animated. Some described him almost as looking tired. Others said he appeared unusually cautious. And in a moment that went viral on Chinese social media when the PLA officers saluted during the troop inspection, Trump returned the salute. Xi did not. He bowed. And Chinese netizens immediately asked, who's the chief commander here? The answer, symbolically speaking, was devastating for Xi's domestic prestige image by his own fault. And let's not forget the music, right? Did you hear when Trump, because we got to watch out for copyrights here, but when Trump walked into the Great Hall of the People, what song was the Chinese military band playing? Did you see it? Check it out on X. They were playing YMCA. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. In Beijing with the Chinese military marching band. I mean, I don't know what stage of the simulation we're in, gang, but this is not a picture of a leader who's negotiating from strength when it comes to Xi. This is a picture of a leader who's trying everything in his power to make his guest feel at home. Xi Jinping was literally playing Trump's campaign song at Trump's own state visit to China. If that doesn't tell you who had the leverage in that room, nothing will. Chinese state media cut its CCTV coverage of the summit to just about 17 minutes or so as compared to 27 minutes back in 2017 with Trump's last visit. The People's Daily front page actually didn't even mention the summit at all on the day of the meeting. These are all signs of a leader managing a delicate domestic political situation, a leader who needed to demonstrate strength to his own party while simultaneously making major concessions to the American president. And that's exactly the box that Trump's pressure campaign that we've talked so much about over the last couple of weeks had put President Xi in. So now, when you step all the way back and look at the full panorama of this 4D chess, the flattery that cost Trump nothing, the Iran defection, the economic avalanche, the pay dirt, and then the symbolic boxing in of Xi. What are we actually watching here? We're watching the full expression of what I've been calling civilizational power being exercised at the highest level of global politics. You see, gang, what the globalist establishment has never understood about Donald Trump is that he doesn't operate from the same rule book as the Kissingers or the Bidens or the Obamas of the world. The entire framework, their entire framework, I should say, was built around managing decline, managing multipolarity, managing the inevitable rise of China as a peer competitor while we inevitably decline. Trump's framework, and by the way, it looked like that was exactly what was happening in the 4 years of Biden. And even in Trump's first term, he was constantly frustrated, especially with Russia hoax nonsense. Trump's framework for Trump 2.0 is completely different. His framework is America has leverage. In fact, America has all the leverage in the world. Use it. America has the oil. America has the chips. America has the jets. America has the most innovative companies on the planet. America controls the waterways. America controls the choke points. Use it. And what we saw in Beijing this week is the full application of that framework. Before Trump ever sat down with Xi, he had already moved the geopolitical pieces. He had already squeezed Iran to the point where the IRGC is losing $500 million per day to this U.S.-led blockade. He had already pressured Venezuela, undermining China's strategic backup in the Western Hemisphere. He had already imposed the tariff pressure that forced Beijing to the negotiating table in South Korea last October. And then he arrived in Beijing with the economic Avengers, offered Xi the face he needed to survive politically at home, and walked away with Boeing contracts, soybean deals, oil commitments, rare earth assurances, and China pivoting away from Tehran. Now, I know the skeptics are going to say something like, yeah, but Dr. Steve, can we trust China to follow through with all of this? And that's a very fair question. But here's the thing. Trump built in the verification architecture. That Blackwell chip ban stays in place. You better behave with a last year's model if you want the cutting edge model when we meet in the fall. The rare earth deal, it's a 1-year suspension, not a permanent waiver. Xi's coming to the United States on September 24th, which means that the next round of pressure leverage is already baked in. And Trump himself told us exactly what to watch for. Watch whether Chinese refiners actually start cutting their Iranian crude purchases, because that is the proof that the oil pivot is real. That's the receipt that shows whether Xi's commitments actually hold. Trump's not trusting China on faith. He's built in a trust but verify, a literal verification architecture deal by deal, summit by summit, leverage by leverage. And here's the civilizational bottom line. China's global influence network is under enormous strain right now. Iran's being squeezed militarily and economically. Venezuela, of course, has been taken off the table for them. The BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, is running into pushback across Africa and Southeast Asia. The Chinese property crisis is gutting domestic consumer confidence. Youth unemployment is at historic highs. And Xi Jinping, who's consolidated personal power in a way that leaves him with no factional buffer if things go wrong, Xi is managing all of this simultaneously while trying to project power for his own party. That's the China that Donald Trump walked into Beijing to negotiate with. Not a rising hegemon operating from strength, but a system under enormous pressure operating from fear. And Trump knew it, and he used it masterfully. The legacy media will spend the next week telling you Trump got played. It's the Rachel Maddow media at this point. They'll focus on the flattery. They'll focus on H200 chips, last year's model. They'll focus on, Xi got whatever he wanted, Trump got nothing, all this nonsense. It's why their audiences are depleting as we speak. But the receipts tell a completely different story. 200 Boeing jets, 600,000 barrels of American oil per day, 25 million tons of American soybeans per year, rare earth controls suspended, China pivoting off Iran, Xi agreeing to broker a peace deal in the Strait, and the Blackwell chip ban still firmly in Trump's back pocket for September. That, my friends, is not a president who got played. That is a president who just outplayed the most sophisticated authoritarian state on the planet in their own palace with their own brass band playing YMCA. That is perhaps the greatest concession of them all. Over to you, gang. Over to you. Our super chats are live. Our moderator, Josh, is putting together your questions. It will be my privilege to to answer them. Also, let's face it, you had a number in your head, right? The number you thought you could retire on. And then the price of life went up. And then it went up again. And then it went up and up. And now the question isn't whether you saved. It's whether what you save can still buy the retirement you planned for. I mean, think about what's happening right now. Wars flaring up, oil spikes, and then everything gets higher. Gas, groceries, insurance bills. We've seen this before. We're watching a structural shift in the global economy where inflation isn't temporary, it's embedded. And historically, when that happens, purchasing power doesn't recover. It erodes. Your dollar buys less. Your savings carry less. And people who are counting down to retirement start wondering if they have enough to push it back. If they actually have to push it back, all because the cost of living moved the finish line. That was my wake-up call. I knew there had to be something else that I could do to protect what I built. So I researched, and that's when I found Augusta Precious Metals. And gang, they taught me things I didn't even know were possible. I had no idea you could move your IRA or 401k into physical gold, tax-free and penalty-free, a real asset that held its value through war, oil spikes, and market chaos. And that changed everything for me. I've spoken with Augusta's education team. These guys, I mean, gang, they know their stuff and they explain it so clearly. So here's what I recommend you do right now. Go to turleybuysgold.com or text Turley to 35052 to get Augusta's free gold IRA guide. That's turleybuysgold.com or text Turley to 35052 because the retirement you dreamed of is still possible, but only if you protect it. All right, what do we got, Josh? What do we got? Let's go on over to what everyone else got to say. You heard me chant enough. Let me get my computer fired up here. Hey, don't tell me my pin is incorrect. Yes, it was, of course. Hey, Dr. Steve, from Stephanie, what is your insight on CIA raiding Tulsi Gabbard's office the other day? And what do you think it means? That is, that was wild, wasn't it? There's a couple of different theories as to what's going on there. There's one theory is that the CIA basically raiding Tulsi Gabbard's office was set up by Tulsi. Another theory is that it's basically it's a coup by the let me give you the full picture here because I think this story is I do think this story is part deep state drama. I think it's part media chaos, and I think it's part deliberate political warfare. Let me try to break that all down. Let's go with what we know. So it goes back to the CIA whistleblower, James Erdman. he testified before the Senate Homeland Security Committee this week, and he alleged that the CIA quietly removed approximately 40 boxes of JFK assassination files and the MK Ultra documents from Gabbard's DNI, so the Office of Director of National Intelligence Office. So documents that were being actively processed for declassification per Trump's own executive order. Now, Florida Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, she just, let's just say she went ballistic over it. She issued a preservation subpoena to the CIA, demanding the documents be returned to the ODNI. Gabbard's own office officially denied it was a raid, and the CIA called the whistleblower testimony bad faith and political theater. So they're in effect denying it. So here's my read on this from what we seem to know, from all the facts of what we seem to know. I do not think this was a setup by Tulsi. I think Laura Loomer was saying that. I like Laura, don't get me wrong, but I think that was Laura Loomer's argument here, that this was Tulsi making. She sees Tulsi and Joe Kent as basically the same, and so she thinks this is Tulsi making hay while Trump is gone. I don't think that, at least I just don't have any evidence that that's the case. Instead, I think what we're watching is the deep state, what's left of it, bureaucracy inside the CIA doing what it's always done. It just seems to me this is the most obvious explanation. It's trying to protect its darkest secrets by removing them before they can be declassified and exposed to the American public. The MK Ultra files here. I have an interesting article on all this. I don't know if you know, it's a covert CIA mind control program that ran from 1953 to 1973, officially authorized by the CIA director at the time. And it used all these illegal human experiments designed to develop techniques for interrogation and psychological manipulation, mind control. They were using LSD and hypnosis and sensory deprivation, torture. The MK Ultra files alone are catastrophically embarrassing to the CIA. The JFK files potentially implicate CIA operatives directly. And the CIA, which technically operates under ODNI, the Office of Director of National Intelligence, apparently decided it would rather defy its own chain of command and face a congressional subpoena than let Tulsi Gabbard declassify those documents. I just think that's the most obvious explanation here, that whatever residual remainder of the deep state got nervous and tried to take those documents back. And they were willing, they continue to believe they can hide behind the layers of bureaucracy so as to avoid consequence. So I don't think this is a setup from Tulsi. I think it's an institution that believes it's still, or there are still players within that institution who believe they're above the law. And the institution always has believed it's above the law. That's why people join the deep state. They join the deep state in order to make money and in order to be above accountability. So now I think the real story here is, what does daddy do when he gets back? Right? The real story here is whether Trump will force Ratcliffe, director of CIA, and the CIA to comply with his orders and return those boxes. That's going to tell us, I think, everything about whether this administration can finally completely break the deep state's iron grip on its own most classified secrets, as it were. So that again, we have limited knowledge of what's going on, and we can make some assessments based on that limited knowledge And those assessments, I try to always go with the most likely explanation of what's going on here. So there you go, Stephanie. That's what I see going on. Thank Don Snodgrass. Thank you so much for the super chat there. Maximilian, so you say that scientific rationalism fails its own test. What are the scientific rationalist arguments that it does pass? What are their rebuttals? And what arguments do we have to disprove that it passes? After all, unless I'm much mistaken, isn't this the Achilles heel? We should be focusing our intellectual attacks on the enemy. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it seems to me from the scientific materialist conception of the world, the contradictory, the self-negating starting point is probably the best place to hit them because it's being widely admitted now. It's being widely admitted that scientism, the notion that science is the only way of truly knowing the world, is an inherently contradictory system. There is no evidence for empiricism, right? If you say, I only believe on the basis of evidence, there is no evidence for that assertion. There is no evidence for evidence. You're assuming a starting point that doesn't exist, which validates all evidence, but it's not itself evidential, right? Or better, you're assuming a starting point that validates all evidence that is not itself evidential and therefore negates itself. It's a better way of looking at it. And then reason by itself suffers. Again, this is widely, right? It's been recognized for ages. It suffers from the fallacy of the infinite regress. Reason never is able to ground itself. Reason is inference. So reason begins with a major premise, then has a minor premise, and then your rational, if your conclusion is a legitimate inference from the two premises. All men are mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. If all men are mortal, and if Socrates is a man, therefore the inference from that, the conclusion, is rational if it's implied in the major premise and the minor premise, namely Socrates is therefore mortal. But how do we know the first premise is true? How do we know that? Right? And how do we even know the second premise? Well, then it has to be from rationality's own rules. The major premise has to have been a legitimate inference from two previous premises. But we only know they're valid if they are the legitimate inference from two previous premises. And that's the infinite regress. That never ends. So rationalism is never able to ground itself. And empiricism's ground is contradictory, self-contradictory, since empiricism is grounded on an assertion, a foundational belief on the validity of evidence that is not itself evidential. There's no evidence for it. It's begging the question of it. So that's where you go, generally speaking, if you're dealing with scientism. But then I'm not sure where you're going with the rest. What are their rebuttals? Let's see. What are the scientific rationale that it does pass? Yeah, to be honest with you, Maximilian, maybe I'm not the best person to ask here. I haven't heard them. I mean, the only rebuttals I've heard are question begging. You know, it's like, well, how can you know if there's no evidence for something? So they just put the shoe on the other foot. And I always play agnostic at that moment. I said, well, I don't know if I can articulate it, but I know that however we do know, it's not evidentialism. I know that because it's self-contradictory. I know it's not rationalism because it suffers from the infinite regress. I know that. So whether I could give you an alternative form of knowledge is not going to help your case for evidentialism or rationalism, right? But I just noticed that they tend to put the shoe on the other foot. They do tend to deflect having to defend their self-contradictory belief system by asking you to defend yours. Other than that, they just constantly go back and forth. They'll say things like, well, mathematics doesn't need any grounding. It's just self-evidential and things like that. But again, it still doesn't work because no, it's not self-evidential. What if I don't believe in that? What if I disagree with that? It's rooted in a worldview. Mathematics makes sense in an ontology, an ontological worldview that opens up for the infinite. But then that's when you start getting into theistic belief. So there you go. I'm not. I think it is the Achilles heel to hit. Focus on the contradiction and be very sensitive to the attempt at deflecting and having you account for your own epistemology apart from or as a way of getting away from having to admit defeat of their own. That's where I'd probably go with that. Benton. Recently, Barbara Boyd of the Promethean reported Senator Alyssa Slotkin, Obama, and the Center of Economic Progress, and Alex Soros joined Mark Carney in Toronto to encourage the American working class to join the globalist progressive socialist movement. They did not have the chutzpah to have the program in the USA. As I understand, Obama may have violated, the Logan Act. Yeah, I'd appreciate your clarity on the matter. I don't know about it, Benton. I love the ladies over at Prometheus Rising, or the Promethean channel that focuses on how the British world order is being overturned by MAGA. And this new civilizationalist order, but I don't know. I wouldn't be able to comment on it. Unfortunately, I haven't caught up. I'm Alyssa Slotkin she's a Republican, isn't she? Let me see. No, sorry, I'm getting her wrong. No, she's from Michigan. Yeah, she's far from it. She's very obnoxious Democrat. Forgive me for even suggesting, for tarnishing the Republican image like that. So I don't know. They are under pressure, enormous pressure to try to win the working class back. That is their Achilles heel. They lost the working class. We're seeing it in the UK. Speaking of, we're seeing it with the local elections last Thursday, where Reform crushed it. And Reform crushed it in both, this was brilliant, it was beautiful, in both blue-collar, traditionally labor regions, as well as traditionally white-collar, traditionally Tory regions. They crushed it in both because they were able to bridge. They pivoted left on economics to bring in the working class, and they pivoted right on culture to keep the traditional Tory vote satisfied as well, because the Tories have been so disappointing on culture. So they've been able to bring both the left and right together in a populist way, because populists see the divide not as left versus right, but the people versus the political class. And as long as the working class have abandoned the left, either Democrats or Labor, Democrats and Labor are shot. They're absolutely shot. They could try to build their coalition on third world identity politics all they want, and LGBT and all that sort of stuff. It's only going to be limited. It's not going to be more than 20 or 30% of the population, and they're going to get crushed. So that's what I think is happening here. And what are the poll sources you rely on showing for Arizona governor elections, et cetera, as well as California governor and LA mayor races? Good question. I do not have specific polling sources for those specific regions. So I tend to I like corroboration. So what I'll do is I'll see one poll and for a race or what's going on in California, and then I want to look at another poll, and then I want to look at another poll. And then I really defer to voter registration trends, because Seth Keshel has made, I think, the very persuasive argument that the most accurate predictive indicator for how an election is going to turn out is how people are registering ahead of the election. Very few people register Republican and then just weeks later vote Democrat. Very, very few. So if we're seeing clear voter registration trends in one direction, that's the party that you will want to favor for the outcome of the election. And you gave me California and Arizona, and both, as I understand, both California and Arizona, Republicans have been crushing it. I forget if California, though, I know Arizona registers according to party. They have a partisan breakdown. Not everybody does, like Wisconsin or Georgia, they don't. So you have to look at bellwethers to see what they're doing. I know Arizona is, and Republicans are crushing it there. It's gonna be a 10-point advantage in the not so distant future over Democrats. Again, though, how that translates at local levels is also harder, because local elections or statewide elections can often not be the turnout that you need, say, in a presidential election. So Seth's model is perfect for a presidential election. He's working on the model for midterm elections, and we'll have to see. We'll have to see how it plays itself out. But I do not have specific pollsters, polling sources for those specific places. I just go with what's out there, and then I try to see if there's a pattern when I corroborate it with other polling. So you don't just go with one pollster. That's the bottom line. Try to combine polling with voter registration. William, Dr. Turley, happy Friday. I'm seeing reports on Mike Pence, his allegedly deep state allegiances to Indiana GOP about redistricting, his being allegedly the leak in the White House, etc. How credible do you believe that these allegations may be and not fantasy? Well, definitely, I don't know about the leaking. It may be there, but definitely he was one of the major forces behind trying to embarrass Trump in not redistricting after Trump specifically said we want those 2 seats. By the way, depending on how you break it down in terms of the forecasts, if Indiana had given us those 2 seats in redistricting, we'd be at 218 right now. Again, I think that's the inside elections forecasting. Cook has us down. The Cook political report has us right now at 211. And Crystal Ball, I think, has us around 214, if I recall. Safe seats. So but inside election, I think, has us at 217. So we'd be at 219 right now. And that was a deliberate attempt to embarrass Trump and to try to lose the midterms, I think. They want Trump's tenure as leader of the Republican Party eliminated. They want it over. And the sooner they can do that, the better. The more wins he racks up, the least likely that will be. They're going to fail in the end, obviously, as we saw, where, what was it, 7 of the 8 end up getting voted out of office in the primaries. So they're going to fail, but it doesn't mean they can't. Again, it's always a matter of how much damage they do in the interim. But no, Mike Pence is behind it every bit as much as I think Nikki Haley was behind the South Carolina collapse of redistricting, picking up that 1 seat in the Senate with the 5 Republicans voting against. By the way, the governor's already calling a special session. They just need a simple majority to do that. So South Carolina looks like It's going to be fine. But yeah, you just have to understand this is the Uniparty. This is the Republican Party. This is the Republican wing of the Uniparty, and they do not like upsetting Democrats because half their stock picks come from Democrats. I'm just going to be blunt to you. These guys are scum. They will hide behind their principles, supposed Republican principles, so they can make money. And they make money. Half their stock tips come from Democrats, so they don't like upsetting Democrats. So that's what's going on. They're scum, and the sooner we get rid of them, the better. Peacefully, we always have to say that, right? Carter Benton, in other words, Trump just pulled the rug from right under Xi, but he didn't do it publicly. It was done so Xi wouldn't be embarrassed. Absolutely, you cannot exactly. You can't embarrass Xi. You can't embarrass Putin. Embarrassing them only has them dig deeper. It only has them acting more recalcitrant towards you. Because they have to save face within their power struggles. So absolutely, you got this. And Trump knows this. And again, for Trump, it's always at the end of the day, how much money is pouring into the United States? How much power are we exercising throughout the world? That's all he cares about. And by the way, that's all they care about too, is power. Not the money coming to the United States, but how much power can they project to their challengers from inside their regimes and also outside with the civilizational sort of gravity that draws their own individual spheres, the Chinese sphere, the Orthodox sphere of Russia, the Hindu sphere of India, the Sunni sphere or Ottoman sphere of Turkey, or the Sunni sphere of Saudi Arabia. How much can you project power in your own hegemon, in your own region? And Trump is very sensitive to that. The only way he's going to rip you apart in that is if there's a full-out war like he's doing with the regime right now in Iran. I mean, he may play around a little bit to get you to the board like he did with Rocket Man, right, in his first term. Richard, Dr. Steve, early poll for Democrat 2028 candidates. AOC, yep, Mayor Pete, Newsom, Kamala. These are clowns on their bench. Your thoughts? You said it pretty well. Yeah, these are. It's just at this point, from what I understand, it's just not a serious. It's not a serious bench. JD, Marco, whoever it is, or a combo of JD and Marco, they're gonna crush them. I mean, at this point. Americans tend to like two terms for a presidency. You have to either have to cheat or you have to be a disaster. You have to be a Carter. You have to be a Bush Senior, I wouldn't. Bush Senior was actually Reagan's third term. It's very hard to only one term of president. And right now with Trump, technically speaking, because of the cheating back in 2020, this is Trump's. I would argue this is his first term in many respects, because this Trump 2.0 is completely unlike anything we saw in his first term. So people are going to want to continue it. They're going to want to keep the border closed. They're going to want manufacturing and industry staying. They're going to want the economic prosperity that it's bringing. They're going to want the relative peace in the world. They're going to want that. They're going to want wokeness staying out of their locker rooms and their lives and so forth. So they'll bring in JD. They'll bring in Marco. Definitely AOC. I do think in the end it's Kamala's to lose, just because of just the demographics of the primaries. Kamala inevitably is going to get the black vote, and the black vote has inordinate influence in national Democrat politics. That's why we thought Jasmine Crockett will probably overtake Tallarico, just because of just the inordinate influence that black and minority votes have in the Democrat Party, just because of they're doubling down on identity politics. It's going to be hard. Tallarico, to his credit, was able to pull it out in the Democrat primaries in Texas, but nationally, it's going to be very hard. I think it's Kamala's to lose. I think she's going to run, and I think it's going to be, like we've seen historically, it's going to be an abject disaster. No one has been able to run after losing in the next election, after losing in the kind of landslide that she did and win. You would have to wait at least one more election cycle like Nixon did. And he didn't lose in a landslide. He barely lost by only 100,000 votes, and that was questionable to begin with. I like both of them. I think Nixon and Kennedy would both be solid Republicans today. But there's just no way. Right now, it's not a serious bench. Joan, off topic. I know natto. Yeah. Oh, natto is a Japanese dish. Does your wife actually like it? I ate it for a while, even cultured, but couldn't stomach the smell, taste, and stringy texture. That's really interesting. You bring that up, Joan. Yeah. So it is. It's not so much a Japanese dish as it is a Tokyo dish. As I understand it, it is a very Tokyo specific dish within Japan. So there are even Japanese who really don't care for natto. But yes, my wife does love natto. She always has it. She's a Tokyo girl. And believe it or not, natto daisuki, as I tell people in Japan, because they've often asked me that if I've eaten natto before. And no one knows it, I guess it's a soybean, a fermented soybean, and it's very sticky and slimy and stringy, but you often eat it with raw egg stirred into it and on a bed of rice. And so, yes, I do enjoy natto. Apparently, it's supposed to be very good for your cholesterol, and so sometimes doctors will actually prescribe it for others. But you're not alone. If you don't like that smell, taste, or stringy texture, you're not alone. Plenty of Japanese don't like it either. Kevin, hey, Dr. Steve, what do you think about the rhinos undermining the redistricting? Yeah. That's the uniparty. That's what got Trump. And this is what they don't understand. That's what got Trump elected back in 2016. And I would argue 2020 and 2024. Yeah, they're the uniparty. That's the wing of the Republican Party that does not want to upset the Democrat side of their stock picks. That's bottom line what it is. All right, it's all about money. It's all about power. It's not about ideology. They don't care about ideology. They don't like the fact that Trump has interrupted their gravy train. So, yeah, we'll see how it all plays out. I think in the end, it looks like we're going to hit 2018. 28. I do that every time. I do 2022, 20. I guess I'm always talking years or elections. It looks like we're going to hit 218. It does. We'll know in the next few weeks, probably next month. It depends which projection model you're looking at. So I'm just looking for at least one projection model to get us 2018. It looks like inside elections is going to give us a safe seat or leaning seat of 220 by the time all's said and done. It's at 217 now, and we've got 4 seats to come. And with Louisiana, South Carolina, Alabama, I think Mississippi is counted in that, whether it's not or no. I mean, that's obviously 2 more than we need. But Cook will fall short. Cook, I think, will at most give us 215. And I think Crystal Ball might get us 218. Right now, as I understand, the projections are 217, 211, and I think 214, I think. Might be 209, something like that. And then that's it. In the end, we just need a few seats, the toss-up seats. And the Democrats would need to run a route with the toss-up seats. They need to win every single one, a feat they didn't even accomplish back in 2018. In 2018. When they won 40 seats, we still won some toss-ups. So we just need to win a few toss-ups, and we keep control of the House. But ask yourself, what political party in their right minds has the opportunity to bake in and secure their majority in the House in perpetuity and doesn't take that? What party is that? A uniparty. that makes at least half their money from the other side. It's the only explanation. Franz, Dr. Steve, if underwriting sanctioned cargo is illegal, how would sanctioned ships port without their liability being covered? And will there penalties for those? And will there penalties for those that cover it? And will there be penalties for those? Okay, let me see if I understand. If underwriting sanctioned cargo is illegal, okay, so right there is no. Well, I wonder. I'll just. I bet there are. I don't know, but I bet there are sort of black market, underwriting organizations, probably via the government. Look, we'll pay you. If you lose the shipment, we'll pay for it. Don't worry about it, kind of thing. And so I wouldn't be surprised if there was under the table underwriting going on. But if underwriting sanctioned cargo is illegal, how would sanctioned ships port without their liability being covered? And will there be penalties for those that cover it? Okay, so I get it. It's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the insurance economy well enough, the Lloyd's of London world. So my initial sense, but you bring a great question. How do they get to ports? How are they allowed to dock and take port real estate up if they're not legitimately underwritten with insurance? It's a good question. I don't know the answer. Don't know the logistics. Very good question. I should find that out. Hold me accountable to that, Franz. Or maybe some people know. Put it in the chat if you guys know. Is it Doiden? Was there any news on Jimmy Lai release? I don't know that either. That's a very good question. Let me check that out, actually. That wouldn't take me more than a minute here. Although, Mike, I've got a super cool computer, but it's slow in terms of like coming out of hibernation. Was Jimmy Lai released? I will ask my super awesome AI if Jimmy Lai was released. No, Jimmy Lai has not been released. In fact, the situation is deeply grim. Oh, that's interesting. In December 2025, Hong Kong's High Court found him guilty of conspiracy to publish seditious material and 2 counts of colluding with foreign forces under their national security law. In February, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison. It's effectively a life sentence because he's 78. Secretary of State Rubio called it unjust and a tragic conclusion. The UN Human Rights Chief called for his immediate release, given his age and health. But there has been no... Trump did say that he would bring it up. Because remember, Xi and Trump had a private meeting with Xi's own daughter, who's Harvard educated, doing the translation. Trump has not told us what he's talked about on that. That is in the Temple of the Heavens. Very interesting stuff. It also indicates Xi is a little paranoid about his own inner circle. So thus far, there's been no public confirmation that Trump secured Lai's release or that he even brought it up with Xi. So we'll have to see. Keep an eye on it. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for not letting, the most vulnerable among us be forgotten. Thank you for that. John, it seems apparent that woke Democrats and European liberals prefer Islam to Christianity. Why do you suppose why this is? You're right. The way I understand it is through the prism of third worldism. Okay, so you can look this up. It's a really interesting kind of rabbit hole, and it's very fruitful because I think it'll connect a lot of things for you. Third worldists believe that Western civilization is evil. It's the absolute evil in the world. And they blame it on whites. And whites are, by definition, the worst racists in the world and everything, and the oppressors and so forth. And so the third world uprising is not only justifiable, but it's actually morally necessary. You are morally obligated if you recognize that the world is made up of oppressor and oppressed, victimizer and victim, and that the oppressor is the Western world, and the oppressed and those who want to revolt against that oppression are the third world. The moment you recognize that, then you are morally obligated to support them in every way imaginable. The first world, Western civilization, is always wrong because they're the oppressor. And the third world, oppressed, is always right because they're the victims. So whatever they're doing, however they're acting out, it is a response to the first blood drawn by the oppressor of Western civilization. This is why the Somali community that's been involved in billions of fraud in Minneapolis, they're only doing it because they were first oppressed by the very people that set up Minneapolis. So you can't blame them. That you would do it too if you were there. That kind of mentality. And the number one religion of course, Western civilization is Christianity. The number one most popular religion among third world is Islam. So Islam is the sacred, it's the sanctified resistance. And so that's why they always side with Islamists. And this is why the Democratic Party is becoming increasingly Islamo-socialist, because it provides the religion and the values that every civilization needs. You've got to have a religion. There's no way around it. And you can't make it up like wokeness. Wokeness is just stupid. So it doesn't go very far. Remember, it splits half the left. The Bill Maher left can't stand wokeness. So, but Islam is, you can't stand against that, because standing against that is standing against the primary sanctification of the revolt, of the revolution, of the oppressed. So that's why they tend to favor Islam, and they denounce Christianity. It's all based on this Marxist binary of oppressor versus oppressed. Politically incorrect forever. Love that tag. Dr. Steve, here's an ideal pork barrel project. Relocate 10,000 plus wild boars to Little Mogadishu in Minneapolis. You're so mean. I can't believe you're making me read this. Then study the environmental impact of wild boars on Little Mogadishu. Oh, you're terrible. Boo, boo. I have to say that. Is that my political correctness coming up? You are politically incorrect forever, for sure. That'd be hilarious. It kind of reminds me of that South Park episode when where are they, in Springfield or wherever? I forget. Or is that The Simpsons? And whatever their town is, it got inundated with hippies. All these hippies, and it became this mass infestation of hippies. So people would find hippies like inside their walls and so forth, and they couldn't stand the smell and the weed and all that sort of stuff. So the way they got rid of the hippies is they had a heavy metal concert on their town green. They started playing metal, and the hippies go, and they start leaving in mass, like the Pied Piper with the rats or whatever, the mice. So that's just very funny. So there you go. Find some cultural symbol that all of them despise, and they run away. France, Dr. Zeev, was our military presence in the Malacca Strait used as leverage to set up negotiations in China? It was, so part of the analysis that I've read is it was part of it. Of course, China would never admit to it, but it was part of it. 80% of China's imports through the Strait of Malacca. Malacca, as I understand it, at its most narrow point, it's only 2 miles wide. It makes Hormuz look like the Pacific Ocean. It is very, very small. And so this latest treaty that we just signed with Indonesia, and Malaysia has already been on our side, and Singapore, of course, is a longtime ally, especially for security. Yeah, I mean, in many ways, that was the ball game. I mean, with the Morocco treaty as well, that we signed to have full rights over Gibraltar in terms of our military, our own Panama Canal, and then Hormuz. I mean, those 4 choke points from Atlantic to Pacific were just. I mean, that's a game changer. He who controls choke points, controls energy, traffic, food, you name it. Weapon shipments, you name it. So that was a huge, huge part of it. That's what I mean when the legacy media talks about how Trump went to Beijing begging. It's just so. Again, it's just part of their idiotic, moronic, TDS narrative that only a Rachel Maddow mentality and increasingly, unfortunately, like a kind of Tucker mentality actually believe. And it's just stupid. It's just dumb. It doesn't even understand the world as it actually is right now. So, yeah. So they won't say it explicitly, but I have seen it in the analysis that Malacca was part of Xi's recognition. All right, we better negotiate here. And it was the meeting had already been set up before we got the Malacca Strait access, but it certainly would have added to the leverage that Trump had. Great question. Excellent question, Franz. Thrawn. Love that. Look at that. Good image there, thumbnail. Why hasn't anyone talked about how the Democrat Party is trying to destroy the Electoral College by pushing that certain states' electoral votes can only go to the person who win the popular vote? I'm with you. Yeah, no, people are talking about that. I appreciate that. It's been brought up several times on our channel. And it's so the bottom line is it's backfiring on them. So they believed, based on the 2000 election, 2008, 2012, 2016, 2020, they believed that the popular vote was forever moving in their direction because they had all of the population in the cosmopolitan areas, the metro areas, LA, San Francisco, Chicago, New York City, Philly, Seattle, Portland, Boston. So they will forever have, for the foreseeable future, have the popular vote locked up. What 2024 showed is that if you can turn out the low to no prop voters that have voted only once in the last 4 elections or didn't vote at all in the last 4 elections, then you can actually negate that popular vote, that more cosmopolitan popular vote, with these low to no props, so that Trump ended up getting 2 million more votes than Kamala. And so now, ironically, as long as the Republican ground game, get out the vote ground game, what we call Go TV, right? Get out the vote ground game, is locked in, like we saw with Cliff Maloney, who I just interviewed. We'll have an interview tomorrow on his latest project. He has a new book out, and implementing the get out the vote efforts along with Scott Pressler. As long as we've got that locked in, we'll be getting those low to no prop voters activated in every election, and we should be able to win the popular vote from the foreseeable future. We can outweigh the Democrats every single time with it, just because low to no prop are the ones that vote populist. They're the ones who voted for Brexit. They're the ones who voted overwhelmingly in last local elections in Britain that gave Reform over 1,400 seats in their local elections. So we can do that. So this is blowing up in their face. That's the irony. But yes, no, they hate the Electoral College because it works in our favor. That's why they hate redistricting. You know, Louisiana could have a map, if I recall, it's 7-0. I think they have seven Congress seats of districts. They could have a 7-0 map where every single district is at least Trump plus 20. Every single district is a plus 20 Trump district. Every one. You don't have to, and not in a single one. They could all be contiguous, exactly like our founding fathers envisioned in the Constitution. They don't have to do the salamander districts or anything like that, or the crab districts, or these insane, weird looking districts that like the Democrats do, because the Democrats have to steer them around this location specific, urban population. So they hate it just because their demographic, their voting demographic, their constituencies are so geographically specific. This is why, in the end, if there were ever, God forbid, a civil war, red states or just the rural population would be able to more or less blockade every single Democrat population center. They couldn't do the same to us. Carter and Steve, the USA also has the rare earth metals, but we're using China's metals first. Well, yeah, we have. Our real rare earth metals are the cache of rare earth metals is coming from Greenland. That's the big one there. And then, ironically, the moon. That's another reason why we're trying to push that there. I don't know if China's metals, as I understand it, are already mined. But yeah, you have to be a little. I don't quite know how to take your comment. We're using China. Is that a betrayal? I don't. There's no betrayal here. I wouldn't go there. There's no betrayal. There may be a carrot for other things, but there's no betrayal. The rare earth monopoly of China, Trump has every intention of breaking. They need, and so he may be in the meantime getting Chinese minerals for the next year at least, because they need our silicon. They need our chips. And that's what Wang's visit with China represented, the CEO of NVIDIA. They need our chips because they just don't have the tech for it. So there's a reciprocity going on there. That's not, I wouldn't read it as a betrayal. That's how I'm interpreting your exclamation mark. But the monopoly is going to come to an end. That's definitely part of America First. Franco, Dr. Turley, can you remind me of that group you used to lose weight? Thank you. Yeah, PhD weight loss. They're wonderful. You'll love them. Dr. Ashley Lucas, PhD weight loss. And tell them I sent you. Harald Dyron, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. The left aren't hypocrites when you understand their ideology. Anything but the West. Yep, that's the third worldism. That's why they support anything that didn't spawn from Roman governance, Greek philosophy, and Christian values. Yeah, you're right. No, you're absolutely right. They start with the Marxist dichotomy, the Marxist binary of oppressor versus oppressed. Everything can be understood through that. And then they decontextualize, meaning there's no historical context for it. Yeah. Whites could have been racist, sure, at one point in time in history, but so were other groups at one point in time in history. Yes, there was slavery at one point in time in history, as there was slavery everywhere else at one point in time in history. So they take all that historical context out and they just say whites racist, racism evil, Western civilization evil, period, end of discussion. So they have basically they have calcified white Western civilization as the epitome of evil now, forever, into the ages of ages. And then they've calcified non-whites, non-Westerners, third worlders as the epitome of struggle against oppression and victimization, and that God is always on the side of the victim, and that we need to be on the side of the victim. And so you got it. That once that's your starting point, and that's why they always begin with moral denunciation. They always begin with, yeah, but that's because you're racist, or yeah, that's because that's your patriarchy. Oh, that's your privilege. They always begin with accusation and denunciation. When in Western rhetoric, in the Western rhetorical tradition rooted in Athens, and then developed, of course, through the great homilies of the Christian tradition, moral denunciation and accusation is always at the end of an argument. So you make your argument and you show all your cards, and then you say, and therefore now we all must rise up and stand up against this. And if I want to argue with that, you have given to me plenty of evidence that I can either, contest, or I can agree with some or disagree with others. But the moment I just come around and say, yeah, you're disgusting and evil, well, there's no contestation. The moment I contest, it's only because you're too blind to see it, right? So you got it. You know it. You know how the game is played. MDE, we're entering back into a system of mercantilism. We were just talking about this last night, actually. Seems advantageous versus globalism. Also, what's your top 3 issues Trump is overlooking possibly? Oh, that's a good question. That's actually a good question. I don't know if I've got 3, but because he's pretty global thinker in that sense. Yeah, so we are going back to the days of trade as being a form of national security. Everyone's an economic nationalist at this point. And economic nationalism is not necessarily protectionism. It could be, but it could also be libertarianism, like what we're seeing with Javier Milei. It could be a combination of the two. Economic nationalism simply argues that the economy is subservient to culture, whereas globalists, like you're talking about here with globalism, the globalists and the liberal international order subverted culture to multilateral economic trade structures, WTO, World Bank, IMF, to a certain extent, the WEF, and so on. And what we're seeing now is the return of 18th, 19th century mercantilism that saw trade as a form of national security, and it is an extension of culture, custom, tradition, and the like. So you're absolutely right. We are in the age of a neo-mercantilism. In terms of and again, I like to point out to people, it's not whether we should be or shouldn't be. It's not whether it's right or it's wrong. It's not necessarily being prescribed. It's being described. This is just where the world is going. There's no way around it. That's what this channel is all about. Description, not necessarily prescription. I mean, obviously, we're all for civilizationalism, nationalism, populism, traditionalism, all that good stuff. We're all for it. We root for it, no question. But what I try to do for you is not necessarily make arguments per se of why it should be. I'm trying to give you a descriptive panorama of how it is. This is what's happening, whether we like it or not. What Trump is not doing, what he's overlooking, I am very concerned about the state of the universities today as being hotbeds of cultural Marxism and radical activism. Somebody once said, I think it was Michael Millerman, who said that our universities are the real sleeper cells, and they will be activated. So if we don't nip the radicalism, the radical Marxist insanity that's being taught, even in a lot of Christian universities, we're going to be back. Wokeness is going to rear its ugly head again in a matter of a generation. So I think he's got to take care of that. And I think he can. He can just cut off the money, get rid of this idiot faculty, or you don't get a dime. Or we'll even raid your money. Harvard will raid your $40 billion endowment. We'll raid it. So play hardball with that. So that one. Because I lived it for 20 years. I saw it. I saw the Marxism. They're insane. They're nuts. There's no talking to them. They're literal useful idiots. They're real believers in this insanity. So I think he's got to do something more with that, which he hasn't. I'm very appreciative of what he's done with the transgender issue in female sports, but it's bigger than that. It's deeper than that. There's a root cause. Yeah, it's funny you're saying, because I was thinking about this not too long ago, about where I thought he was overlooking a couple of things here. It's good. I don't know if I could come up with three on the spot. That first one, the university one, is huge. I would like him. I'd like to see him take down the Democrat Party. I think he was using the term, the radical leftist, radical terrorist left, or something like that. I would have liked to, especially after Charlie's assassination, I would have liked to have seen him in a full-blown crackdown on the left in our country, the political left, in terms of its funding. I know we got rid of USAID, but I think we could go deeper. I've been waiting to see someone like Soros brought up on RICO charges. I haven't seen anything like that. I don't think he's been harsh enough on the political left. So there you go. So it would be related there. Those would be two. And I'm sure I could figure out a third as well. But those two, I'd like to see him do more. You're taking out the regime in Iran. Take out the regime here. That's what I'd like to see. Shira, Mega, let's go. And then Elus. What is Elus? I don't know that. But yes. So prayers for Jerusalem. So make America great again. Is it make Iran great again? And then prayers for Jerusalem. Absolutely. And there are. I mean, Israel is doing wonderfully. Israel is demographically, they have about 3 children, as I understand it, per couple. They have one of the highest demographics rates among all OECD nations. And they're crushing it technologically, economically, culturally. They're getting more and more conservative with Haredi Jews having the majority of children. So they're prayers for Jerusalem. It looks like they're being answered. Mary, how would you compare or contrast the political and military objectives outcomes of USA's overwhelming force in Iran versus Russia's cauldron in Ukraine? Russia rescuing Russians in Donbass versus USA's rescue of Persian Iranians. Wow. Great question. It's a very good question. So let me go the reverse there for you. So I do see the same great power politics operative in both theaters. So that's why I've taken the views I have. So I see Russia responding to the encroachment of the great power of NATO, i.e. US, into their civilizational sphere that Putin has been talking about for over a decade, that great powers never allow. A great power, like Mearsheimer has talked about it ad nauseum, but great powers never allow for a peer competitor within their hegemon. They'll have no problem with a peer competitor somewhere else in their own hegemon, i.e. Russia and China and their relationship together. But Russia doesn't encroach on China. China doesn't encroach on Russia. But by definition, or else you're not a great power. And when we started to make inroads with Ukraine by arming them to the teeth to deal with the Donbass breakaway, the separatists, and in the Donbass region. Putin said, "You're basically you're turning Ukraine into a de facto NATO power," and we've said that you can't do that. You're not allowed to do it, and that's a red line, and you cross it, and we're gonna act in a similar manner. I think Trump made it very clear with the Abraham Accords architecture in place that was brokered by the United States that brought Israel together with Sunni Arabs. Not all, to be sure, but many were. There was a rapprochement going on between Saudi Arabia and Israel. And it affected what the Abraham Accords did is it effectively took the Palestinian equation off the map, and it was bringing together Israeli might with Arab money. So, you've got Bahrain, and you've got Morocco, and you've got Sudan. You have the UAE. So they're all joining together. This is why it's patent lunacy to argue that this is Trump doing Bibi Netanyahu's bidding when Bibi Netanyahu is on the same side as Sunni Arabs. It's patent lunacy. Mohammed bin Salman was lobbying Trump every bit as much as Bibi. So it's just, whereas that would not have been thinkable before 2020 when the Abraham Accords were formally signed. Not that Saudi Arabia is technically a part of Abraham Accords, but that architecture they are very much a part of Israeli might combined with Arab money. And the encroachment into that architecture via China was a no-no. And Trump had made that very clear. Trump had said, whenever he says that Iran is not allowed to have a nuclear weapon, that is him saying we are not going to allow China to permanently control the Strait of Hormuz. That's not going to any more than it would be allowed to happen in the Panama Canal. It's not going to happen, or the Strait of Gibraltar. It's just simply not going to happen. And so, but China was encroaching more and more and more. And finally he said, that's it. We're done. We're going in. So I think it's the same great power politics playing out, or similar great power politics playing out, where great powers do not allow. And for Trump, the great power in that region was the U.S. brokered Abrahamic Accords. They were being challenged by Iran and its proxies, and being financed by China, so that China could have a tacit control over the Strait of Hormuz, from which it gets 40 to 50% of its oil. So that's where they're similar. Where they're very different is it doesn't seem that Russia has the 5G military capability that we have. So 3G is land, sea, and air. 5G is the cloud. It's cyberspace, and then it's the astropolitics, the astrosphere, the satellites, and so forth. We have 75% of all satellites that are revolving around the world, literally, and then we have tremendous control over what's called the noosphere, which is the cyber world, the cloud that covers with the globe, with our dominance in AI and quantum computing. And so this war that we've seen, and how we've been able to render Iran inert in basically 30 days in a way that Russia has not been able to accomplish with Ukraine, I think demonstrates the power of 5G warfare over and against 3G. I think Russia is still very much 3G warfare. Very powerful with 3G warfare, no question. But so is Iran. And look what 5G can do to 3G. As long as and so that's where you get into the whole idea of the cauldron and so on. as long as the longer this war drags on, I think the harder it's going to be for Russia, because increasingly Ukraine is turning into a 5G theater and not just a 3G theater in terms of warfare. Increasingly, they're getting access to the cyber technologies, the AI technologies, and so forth. And increasingly, we're going to start allowing them to tap into the satellite technologies and the Space Force technologies. And that's just going to be harder and harder and harder for Russia. And again, case in point, from if the data is right, over the last several months, it's been the first time that Ukraine has been able to actually gain back more land than it's losing. We just hadn't seen that throughout the entire theater. Russia always had the upper hand in that. And Ukraine seems to be reversing that. I don't think they're ever going to get the 20% back that they've lost. They're certainly not going to get Crimea back. And so I just think, and then Trump is trying to decouple Russia. He's trying to do a reverse Kissinger, trying to decouple Russia from China. And I think that's just going to be the carrot. He's going to give him, look, you can have the Russians speaking like you have here, rescuing the Russians in the Donbass. He's just going to allow Russia to have it. There's great power politics here. Yes, the United States is going to allow, it's the way it works, because we're the ones supplying all the weapons and so forth, or at least the means, 5G means. It's going to allow Putin to have that 20% if Putin then will decouple itself from China and move more in the direction of the United States. Putin himself has said the big snag to that right now is European globalist European bullies in Brussels, leaders who are the ones who are basically the fly in the ointment of all that. So we'll have to see how that plays out. In terms of rescuing and so forth, again, it's civilizational. It's going to be a little different since it's Russians in the Donbass, whereas, Persians, we don't have necessarily a stake in that directly. But, I mean, it's similar to what we're seeing with the Venezuelans, Cubans, expat Persians here. There's huge expat Persian populations, I understand, primarily in L.A., or just concentrated in L.A. It'll be the same thing. It's America as a civilizational gravity, civilizational center where expats can come, enjoy our freedoms, and then root to see those freedoms eventually extended because of the civilizational core that the United States has, the gravity that it pulls into itself for other sovereign nations to enjoy what we have. I think they're going to be very, very excited about that. But it's different. It's very different than Putin defending his own, ortho-ethnosphere with Eastern Ukraine. I just see those as very different there. But yep, there's a lot of similarity, and then there's the 3G, 5G difference. ROTO, great and Laird, Patriot Professor. Have you been following the Crypto Clarity Act? Not like I should, and I love crypto. Let's see. Let me just get latest on Crypto Clarity Act. Let's see. Let's say where it is. I see that it just cleared the Senate Banking Committee yesterday along mostly party lines, but still faces the steeper climb, of course, with our dysfunctional Senate floor. It's going to need at least 7 Democrats, with key Democrats like Elizabeth Warren opposing it over money laundering and political profiteering. Just give it clarity for everyone here. I don't see how it passes the Senate, to be honest with you. So the whole point of it's to establish this clear legal framework for determining whether a digital asset is a commodity regulated by the CFTC or security regulated by the SEC, ending years of regulatory ambiguity that has hampered the American crypto industry. I mean, Trump wants crypto flourishing. It's going to be there. Somebody's going to make it flourish. And Trump wants us to have a clear advantage, dominance over cyber civilization. And this is the finance of cyber civilization. So we'll see. Again, it is this ambiguity of whether it's under the CFTC or whether it's under the SEC. And we'll just have to see how it fleshes out and plays out. Texas and LaShock. Why do you think John Thune is resisting the SAVE Act so much? I'm just not seeing how it would benefit him. Amnesty would not be acceptable, but it would be understandable at least. This I don't get. I'm with you. I'm with you on this. I see Thune as an establishment guy. He's an old rhino dinosaur. And as is the Senate in general, most of the Republicans in the Senate in general. This is why I think John Cornyn is going to go down in Texas as he ought. At least Lindsey Graham votes the way that Trump always wants him to vote. So that's good. But no, I just think John Thune is just trying to wait out Trump in the end. And hopefully things will just go back to normal. With the Romney-Ryan Rove wing of the party. He's wrong, but he's not willing. He apparently is not willing to do what he needs to do to play hardball to get this passed, even though 80% of the country wants it. So if ever there were a bill to pass, an act to pass via finagling the filibuster, or putting it in reconciliation like John Kennedy wants, this is the one. So I'm with you. I kind of scratch my head at its absurdity. Move erotic. Why isn't gas going down if we're producing so much? No, it doesn't work that way. I know. It doesn't work that way. We may be producing so much, but we have an inordinate amount of the world buying from us right now, and with limited global amounts, with Hormuz it's about 20% of the world's oil comes through Hormuz. So with say 15% taken off the table, the supply can't keep up with the demand. It doesn't. We're selling twice the amount we normally do, but it's priced globally, and it's even priced locally at the point where, okay, we're supplying twice the amount. That doesn't mean we have the full infrastructure to accommodate that demand. So just the bottom line with oil is the supply has yet to catch up to the demand, and therefore the price is going to be inflated until we have equilibrium and the supply catches up with the demand, and then you'll see the prices going down exponentially. Mitchell, really concerned with data centers taking too much power, leaving people without electricity. Didn't Trump sign an executive order saying that these centers have to provide their own power? Good question. I don't know about that. I wouldn't worry too much about that because, again, this is part of what all of our expeditions to the moon is going to be about. It's all about water ice and helium-3. That's going to create fusion-based energy that can fuel anything and everything we possibly need all over the planet at a literally micro fraction of the cost, and it's all clean. And the moon has literally infinite supply of it in the way it gets synthesized. So it's not, you don't have to worry about it too much. It's long term, it's not going to be an issue. There might be a short term pain here or there, but long term, it's not going to be an issue. This is why Elon is so freaked out about solar energy and electric energy and the like. But he's freaked out about that because he's obsessed with it. I should say, not freaked out. He's obsessed with it because he knows, you're not going to have fossil fuels on the moon. You're not going to have fossil fuels on Mars. So you're going to have to find your energy somewhere else. And through fusion, we can get, from like helium-3 and so forth, we can start getting the compounds that we need for genuine energy that is far cleaner and far more abundant than fossil fuels. So I wouldn't worry about it in that sense. And that's the way Trump is thinking. He's thinking down the line there. You worried? Polls say we could lose Texas Senate race. Yeah, the same polls that told us that Kamala Harris was going to win in a landslide. As I understand it, it is a very, very rare thing in politics, incredibly rare, for the party whose presidential candidate won by double digits to turn around and lose that state the following election. That's a very, very rare thing indeed. So you don't have to worry about Texas is not voting. It's not voting for a guy who believes that God is binary. So you got to learn that polls are manipulated all the time they always are manipulated in one direction. It's always to the left. Mamba Boz, how many more do we got here, Josh? Let me give me a sense of we're over at 2 hours here. FYI, China and Russia are building huge port cities and airports in Greenland for oil and minerals to bypass the unstable, Middle East. Trump wants to do the same thing and keep the oil flowing. We are seeing that big time. We're seeing the UAE just announced that they're bypassing and going straight into the Strait of Oman. Saudi Arabia has its east-west pipeline that goes straight into the Red Sea. They're bypassing Hormuz. It's too unstable regardless of what happens. And the great bypass of these choke points in terms of the railways, shall we say, or the rivers of oil movement is happening. And so that it's exactly, again, this is a disruption of oil prices and so forth. It's not a correction. It's just a temporary disruption until a new oil infrastructure, global oil infrastructure is created. And what Trump wants to make sure is that the United States is at the center of that. And he's doing it. We'll have at the end of it all, at least tacit, either direct or tacit control of 50 to 60% of the world's oil production. It's astonishing. And with that, gang, I want you to all have a wonderful weekend. Check out my interview with Cliff Maloney tomorrow from Pennsylvania Chase and Doors Win Wars. He's going to show you exactly how he plans to help with the midterms and 2028. And also keep an eye on the channel because I'm going to be your back porch professor for any breaking news and analysis you're not going to get anywhere else. Love you guys. God bless.